Adeline was 27, a single mother trying to keep her dignity in a world that never stopped reminding her of what she lost. She thought going to her cousin Clara's wedding in Dallas would be awkward but survivable. She packed Eli's little suit with trembling hands, hoping his bright smile would shield her from the sting of cruel comments. The venue shimmered with glass chandeliers and polished marble floors, the kind of wealth Clara's family loved to display. Adeline tried to blend into the crowd, but she never could. Not with her modest dress, not with the quiet way she carried herself, and not with the little boy holding her hand. The music swelled, and the groom appeared. Adeline's breath locked in her chest. It wasn't just any man. It was Damien. The man she once loved, the man who had walked out of her life when she needed him most. He stood at the altar, smiling at her cousin, ready to vow his forever, while she sat in the shadows with the child he didn't know existed. Her chest tightened, the old betrayal rushing back, raw as the day it happened. She tried to steady herself, but Eli tugged her hand and whispered, "Mama, why does that man look like me?" Damien walked forward with a calm confidence that drew every eye in the room. The sharp jaw she once traced with her fingertips, the eyes that once promised her the world, he hadn't changed. If anything, life had carved him into something untouchable. Clara glowed beside him, her white dress hugging her like a prize she had earned. The preacher's words about love and loyalty stung like salt on a wound. Damien had spoken those same promises to Adeline once, in a small Houston apartment, before everything fell apart. She sat frozen, her palms pressed to her lap, pretending not to hear the whispers sliding through the crowd. Her son's gaze, wide and searching, stayed locked on the groom. Years earlier in Houston, Adeline had been 22, fresh out of school, hopeful and alive. Damien had swept into her world with ambition and fire. He spoke of skyscrapers he would one day own, of an empire he was building, and he made her believe she was part of it. Nights were spent on city sidewalks, sharing cheap tacos and dreams that felt endless. She believed him when he said she was his forever. But forever ended the night she told him she was pregnant. His face hardened, his words turned sharp, and the man who once swore devotion accused her of trapping him. Promises dissolved into silence. He walked out, and she never saw him again. The judgment that followed was heavier than his absence. A single mother. A disappointment. A mistake. She raised Eli on scraps of jobs and the few relatives who didn't turn their backs. She buried Damien's name, buried the story, and buried the girl she used to be. Now, sitting in Dallas, all those buried pieces came clawing back. The hall glowed with chandeliers and Clara basked in attention, while Adeline sat stiff, clutching Eli's hand as whispers circled. She tried to keep her head down, but her son squirmed restlessly in her lap, his eyes never leaving the man at the altar. "Mama," Eli whispered, tugging her sleeve, "is that man?" She shook her head quickly, panic in her chest. But children don't always listen, and sometimes they see what adults try hardest to hide. The music swelled as Clara reached for Damien's hand. Guests leaned forward to watch their vows. And in that moment, Eli slipped from Adeline's grasp. His small shoes clattered on the marble floor as he ran straight toward the groom. "Daddy!" His voice rang out, clear and certain, cutting through the hall like thunder. Every head turned. The crowd froze. Damien bent instinctively, confusion on his face, as Eli's little arms wrapped around his leg. The silence was suffocating. Clara's smile faltered, her hand flying to her mouth. Murmurs spread like wildfire through the guests. Adeline rose to her feet, her body shaking, heat burning through her skin. Damien's eyes flicked up, landing on her. For the first time in years, their gazes locked, and the past surged between them. He looked down at Eli again, studying the boy's face, then back at her. His jaw tightened. "What is this?" His voice was low but sharp, heavy enough to slice through the whispers. Clara staggered back a step, her dress swishing against the floor. The room bristled with tension, and there was no place left for Adeline to hide. The ballroom erupted in chaos. Guests whispered louder, leaning toward each other like fire feeding on dry grass. Clara's mother's face turned red with fury, her hand clutching her pearls. Damien stood frozen, Eli still clutching his leg. He looked like a man caught between two worlds, one he chose, and one he never knew existed. Adeline tried to reach her son, but her path was blocked by stares and murmurs. The relatives she'd avoided for years were now circling her with their judgment sharper than knives. Someone hissed, "She planned this." Another sneered, "Shameless." Damien's voice cut through the storm. "Adeline, is this true?" His eyes locked on hers, fierce and demanding. She swallowed, her lips trembling, but no words came out. Clara stepped forward, her face pale with shock, her hand clutching Damien's arm as if to hold him still. "Tell me." Damien's voice thundered across the hall. Silence fell again. Every soul in the room was waiting for her next breath. Adeline opened her mouth, but her cousin Clara's voice sliced in first, sharp, trembling, and furious. Clara's scream echoed through the hall. "You're lying. This is some pathetic stunt to ruin my wedding." Her face was twisted, her perfect image shattering in real time. The crowd gasped, torn between sympathy and scandal. Damien pulled away from her grasp, his eyes still drilling into Adeline. "I'm asking you one thing," he said, his tone low but heavy with years of buried betrayal. "Is he mine?" Adeline's hands shook. Her son stood there, wide-eyed, still holding on to the man who had once abandoned them. The weight of the moment crushed her chest. She wanted to protect Eli, to protect herself, but the truth had already spilled into the room. Clara turned on her, venom dripping from her voice. "You always wanted what was mine. First, you tried to outshine me. Now this. You're disgusting." Adeline's voice finally broke free, small but steady. "He's not yours, Clara. He's his." The words rippled through the crowd like a stone in water. Damien staggered back, his hand slipping from Clara's. His gaze flicked between Adeline and Eli, the resemblance undeniable now that the truth had been spoken aloud. Clara let out a choked sob, her dream collapsing before her eyes. Damien turned toward Adeline, his voice a whisper sharpened by anger. "We need to talk. Now." Adeline was pulled into a side room, away from the shocked eyes of family and guests. Damien slammed the door shut behind them. His chest rose and fell as though every breath was a battle. Eli clung to his mother's skirt, sensing the storm but not understanding it. "You hid him from me?" Damien's voice cracked, filled with disbelief. "All these years. You let me live like he didn't exist." Her throat burned. "You left me, Damien. You didn't believe me when I told you. You walked out." His fists clenched at his sides, struggling with memory and rage. "I thought you lied. I thought you wanted to trap me. And now you see." Her voice shook but carried fire. "Look at him. Look at his face. He never asked for this. I raised him alone while you built your empire and forgot I even existed." Damien's eyes softened for just a moment as he looked at the boy. Eli's small fingers gripped his pant leg, his innocent eyes mirroring his father's. The weight of truth was undeniable. Clara's mother burst into the room, her voice cold and commanding. "If you claim that boy, you'll destroy everything." The older woman's words hung heavy. Her presence filled the room with a force as sharp as glass. She pointed at Adeline, her lips curling. "She is nothing. She will not drag you down with her mistakes." Adeline felt the sting but held her ground. "Don't you dare call him a mistake." The woman's glare sharpened. "You think you can embarrass us like this? We'll crush you before you ruin Clara's name." Damien's face twisted, torn between the two women. His mother-in-law's threat echoed with power, but the boy at his side was proof of a truth too strong to ignore. Eli shifted closer to Adeline, sensing the hostility directed at her. For a moment, Damien's hand hovered near his son's shoulder. The crowd outside the door was buzzing, the scandal spreading like wildfire. Clara's muffled sobs leaked into the hall, each one laced with rage. Damien turned back to Adeline. His voice was quieter, more dangerous. "This doesn't stay here. You can't run this time." Adeline lifted her chin, her heart pounding. "I'm not running. Not anymore." The next morning, the sun poured into Adeline's small apartment, far removed from the glimmer of Clara's wedding. She sat at the edge of her bed, Eli curled in her lap, her thoughts heavy. The fallout had only just begun. Her phone buzzed endlessly, missed calls, texts filled with accusations and threats. Some begged her to stay quiet, others demanded answers. Her family had turned the wedding into a battlefield overnight. Clara was humiliated, her marriage ruined before it began. And Damien, once untouchable, was now entangled in a scandal that could stain his empire. A knock echoed on the door. She froze. Eli stirred, yawning softly, unaware of the storm outside their walls. She opened the door slowly, and there he was, Damien, standing in the morning light, exhaustion etched across his face. He stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. His eyes scanned the modest apartment, the toys stacked in the corner, the simple furniture. It was a different world from the glittering halls he lived in. "You should have told me," he said softly, almost broken. "All those years. I missed everything." Adeline's arms tightened around Eli. Her voice was low. "You didn't want to believe me then. Why should I believe you now?" Damien crouched down to meet Eli's eyes for the first time, his voice unsteady. "Because now, I know he's mine." The first time Damien showed up at the park where Eli played, Adeline didn't know if she should scream at him or walk away. He stood there in his tailored suit, clearly out of place among the laughing kids and tired mothers, but Eli spotted him right away. The boy's face lit up, and before Adeline could stop him, he ran straight into Damien's arms. Damien lifted him awkwardly at first, like a man unsure of his right to hold something so fragile. But Eli didn't hesitate. He clung to his father as if it was the most natural thing in the world. That sight cracked something in Adeline's chest. For years she'd been both mother and father, and now here was the man who'd abandoned them acting like he belonged. She wanted to push him away, to tell Eli no, but her son's laughter was too pure to interrupt. Damien caught her eyes across the playground. "Let me try," he said softly. "Not with you. With him." Adeline's heart twisted. Could she let him step in now, after all the pain he'd caused? The news spread faster than wildfire. Headlines called it a scandal. Billionaire CEO's secret son exposed at family wedding. Reporters camped outside Adeline's apartment, microphones shoved in her face whenever she stepped outside. Some called her a liar. Others painted her as a gold digger who timed the reveal for maximum damage. Clara was ruthless. She went on local TV, sobbing into cameras about betrayal, about how Adeline ruined her life. She spun the story until strangers online spat venom at Adeline, calling her names she hadn't heard since college. But Damien surprised everyone. At a press conference, he didn't deny the boy. He didn't call Adeline a liar. Instead, he admitted he had doubts years ago, and those doubts cost him his family. For the first time, the world saw cracks in his polished image. He wasn't the untouchable CEO anymore. He was a man facing his mistakes. When reporters asked Adeline for a response, she looked straight into the cameras. "He's my son, and I raised him alone. Whatever comes next, I'll protect him first." The clip went viral. Some still judged her, but others saw strength where before they'd only seen scandal. The DNA test removed any last shadow of doubt. Damien's blood matched Eli's, and suddenly the fight was no longer about truth but about ownership. Lawyers called. Papers arrived. Clara threatened lawsuits. Damien's board worried his reputation would drag down the company. Adeline's world tilted again. She had spent years surviving without Damien, and now his empire was forcing its way into her life. She didn't want his money or his pity, only fairness for her son. But Damien was changing. Instead of crushing her with his power, he showed up at her door, not as a CEO but as a man desperate to know his child. He brought books, toys, even sat on her worn couch reading to Eli until the boy fell asleep in his lap. Adeline stood in the doorway watching, torn between anger and something she couldn't name. The lawyers could fight over headlines, but what shook her was seeing Damien on the floor of her tiny apartment, building towers of blocks with Eli, his expensive watch forgotten on the carpet. That wasn't the man who'd left her. It was someone new, and that was even harder to face. Clara struck back with everything she had. She filed complaints, threatened custody battles, and filled the gossip columns with poison. She told anyone who would listen that Adeline was unstable, unfit, manipulative. But every time Adeline expected Damien to turn his back, he didn't. He silenced the tabloids with legal firepower. He publicly cut ties with Clara's family. Most shocking of all, he showed up at Adeline's job one afternoon and told her he was done hiding. "I'm not protecting her anymore," he said. "I'm protecting you." And him. Adeline didn't know how to respond. Her whole life she'd waited for him to choose, and here he was, standing in front of her with everything at stake. The man who once ran from her now looked ready to burn his empire down just to stand by her side. Still, her heart carried scars. Could she trust him again? Could she let him into a life she had built from ashes? Months later, the world looked different. The lawsuits faded. Clara's venom burned itself out. Damien shifted his wealth and influence toward something new, a foundation in Houston, built in Eli's name, focused on helping single mothers and children like them. Adeline was at the center of it, her ideas shaping the mission. At the opening ceremony, Adeline stood on stage with Damien and Eli, flashes from cameras bright as lightning. She thought of who she had been 5 years ago, alone, ashamed, fighting to prove herself. Now she stood taller, not because of his power but because she had claimed her own. After the event, Damien pulled her aside. His hand trembled as he reached into his pocket. She froze as he revealed the small velvet box. The man who once abandoned her now asked for a second chance, not as a savior but as a partner. Tears burned her eyes. "I don't need your empire," she whispered. He smiled, softer than she'd ever seen. "Good. I don't need a queen. I just need you." For the first time in years, she didn't feel like she was falling. She felt like she was standing exactly where she was meant to be.